affected in Nigeria, and said that Lagos alone accounts for 50% of the number of cases with this new variant. What are your thoughts, please?
I, I think as a whole, Nigerians have become lax when it comes to the issue of COVID-19. Um, like like we continue to say, you really can't blame them because of the economic situation. So everybody is still trying to make a living. But the truth is, COVID-19 is still there.
Mm.
We should continue to ensure that we adhere to all the
Protocols.
protocols for put together by the NCDC. Wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance, and one of the good things is that to as to date we've had about 8 million of the AstraZeneca vaccines into Nigeria, and we're expecting some more, or we've gotten some more
Four
with the
million.
Modena, about 4.8 million.
Mm.
So in all, we should have been able to vaccinate about 4 million people in total. Um, with another 4.8 million coming, then it becomes it continues to improve on the vaccination. So for those who have not taken the vaccinations, who are scared because of one reason or the other, it's advisable you take this vaccination.
Mm.
Of course, those who are vaccinated do have some form of
Immunity.
immunity.
Mm.
Will continue to protect the larger society, and we might just be able to get to um, that number where we're sure that the the disease can be managed as a whole. So it's important that we keep to the protocols. It's important that we are still cautious about the fact that the Delta variant is even more virulent than the other ones that have come before now. So Nigerians, our advice to you is wear your mask, wash your hands. For those who can get vaccinated, should go take the vaccination as soon as possible.
I'm a bit worried about something, and I'll speak up for most people who are probably still harboring that thought. Would it be so much to ask for the federal government to seek ways to make it to make PCR tests available to Nigerians who can't afford 50,400 naira,
What
make it available for them to them for free?
what if you
Because that's one of the deterrents, yeah.
Yes,
Deterring people
it's a
from,
major deterrent.
it
yes,
is
deterring people from taking tests.
and I agree, but if you look at the report, they say there are about I think about 40 or 50 private centers and about 89 government centers. So I think the government should really make the 89 centers more available to Nigerians and try as much as possible to reduce the cost of testing to zero. For those who can afford it, should as much as possible um, go to the private centers and take the test. And it's important we continually take out the test for as long as you're not vaccinated. And I agree with you, Valentine. I would agree with you on the fact that the government should try as much as possible to make the testing more available in those 89 centers for
Yes.
free.
And also saying that thanks for acknowledging the 4 million doses of Moderna vaccines that have come in from the US, and hoping that that would go round because they've put in measures to share these vaccines and make it available in every state through the health centers. But moving on to the next story, there's a
There's a headline on the.
yeah, no, that's
Federal
he's
okay,
touched
so
on
you've
it.
Yeah,
done that.
I'd
He's already
spoken about
treated
that.
it, yes.
And the good thing they said also that they have at least every state has the facility to be able to store the vaccine. So
Yes.
that's great news for us.
Cold chain storage.
I think it's also important to mention that this isn't part of the money allocated recently signed by the president to purchase vaccines.
Mm.
No,
This, according to Mr. Boss Mustafa, is a gift from the United States
United
of
States.
America, so that when we're in the future, when we come back to ask for how this money was spent,
Mhm.
this wouldn't be included.
Exactly.
I totally agree. That was
No,
great
no, it's
noting
important
that.
for us to look out for that because
Yeah.
if we see stories like that, we should be able to flag it. You
Yeah.
know, this isn't. Well, thank you, Ayo, for mentioning that. Very important point there. The Punch newspaper has this headline: Director arrested for extorting 500 naira from Abia students. So the said director is working in the Ministry of Education in that state. This story really brings to mind a lot of experiences I've had as a child growing up. You see students being sent home for fees or levies that have been asked of them, you know, or asked of their parents through them. and they are punished for it, because when the students are sent home, they're embarrassed. Sometimes they are punished, they are flogged physically, right, in the school, for not paying this sum. So apparently, what happened was the said person or the officer working under the Ministry of Education in that state signed for the permanent secretary without the consent of the said permanent secretary, issuing letters to primary and secondary schools in the state for that fee of 500 naira from each student. What are your thoughts, seeing that the individual has been arrested?
So the first thing here is anything that relates to having to get fees from students should actually be sent to the schools directly. So this, for me, you writing a letter from the Ministry of Education as director, it should be a circular that is sent to the schools, and the principals and the head teachers in the schools would make that information available. But this coming directly from the director it just goes to tell us the level of decadence in the system as a whole.
So I think so what really happened is what you thought would happen. He signed for the permanent secretary, so it was assumed that it was the circular coming from the permanent secretary,
So
which was false.
which was false. And the question here is, why didn't they just ask? Sometimes you should make inquiries about this, and I'm sure this is what brought about some parents that started asking, what is this levy for again?
If not,
Nobody would probably have found out.
Exactly.
And then you can imagine the number of children in primary and secondary school. Let's just give is a small estimate of 1,000 children in one school.
Very small.
That's 500,000. So you
Yeah.
can imagine the number of schools. So you can the level of fraud that we're looking at here is quite huge. And at the end of the day, how does that speak about our governance system? And then we continue to talk about lack of education, poor education funding, and
Quality
of,
yeah, the clear quality of education in our
and
states.
then a director is extorting money
Yeah.
from parents. It's such a sad situation that we find ourselves in Nigeria, and everybody's just looking for how to take and not giving back.
But to me, it's cheering news. I mean, what elating about this story is the fact that he's been caught. The director was caught. I mean, most of the time this happens and goes, under the radar. Nobody hears about it. Nobody is even arrested. This is one of the first of a few arrests that have been made, in the sector, especially in the education sector, with something so widespread as this.
I think a big one would be beyond this is how we say in Nigeria that you catch the small time criminals and the bigger ones they go scot-free. This is just 500 naira in a school in Abia State. A number of us, like Valentine
Per
mentioned,
student.
per student, are aware of how university lecturers, secondary school teachers in our public schools, especially in our public schools, extort money from students. It's become so rampant. It's
become the
almost
norm.
become the norm. It's seen as the norm. So miss me with this headline about 500 naira because there are bigger fishes to fry. So if we're talking about dealing with it, if we're dealing with the root cause and actually eradicating this in our schools so that students don't suffer, then yes, that's a big headline. So great win for this one, but I'm hoping that it won't just be, it's the foot soldiers that are easily at the scapegoat. Let's deal with the lecturers, the kingpins in the universities who are doing this.
I totally agree with you, Ayo. And it's just a shame that the quality and level of education has gone down so badly, and everybody's just asking for money, and it's amazing. But it also shows you the level of economic deprivation in the country as a whole.
Yes, but there's something else to add. You know how we always say, oh, it's a shame how the quality of education has dropped, how bad things have gone. The usual reaction, the very common reaction is blame the government. The government is not giving funding, it's not releasing money, it's not approving enough budget for education. But if you're checking factors that affects the quality of education in Nigeria, this is one major one.
This is a major one.
And Ayo mentioned
The second one
bigger
is
example, the
continuous
universities.
extortion.
You hear of ASU
universities.
going on strike. There's still a conversation between ASU and the federal government. What are
Yeah.
those small issues that add up to this bigger problem? These are the things. Now, the next story, Premium Times, detained Buhari must go protesters, wants SSS boss jailed for disobeying court order. That was a story we treated last Monday, a week ago. talking about these protesters that were arrested. They had these inscriptions printed on their T-shirts. Buhari must go. They were arrested by the SSS and questioned and kept in detention. The court, a federal high court sitting in Abuja, had ordered their release since last week, but they haven't been released. So they filed a lawsuit against the director of the SSS, asking. I think the lawsuit is here. It's the filing is Notice of Consequences of Order of Course, also known as Form 48. The file is on the 30th of July to push for the jailing of the SSS boss for flouting court order. What are your thoughts, please?
You know, when people in government talk about people obeying the law, then you tend to wonder what happens if a court gives an order and the government parastatal does not obey the order. So it's unfortunate. That's one. Secondly, if there was a court order that this 5 individuals should be released, then they should have been released. If you were going to charge them, and if you read through the story, when the release order was given, they quickly went to a magistrate court who actually gave them granted them bail, and they had met all the bail conditions, but they are still in custody. So what exactly are they being held for? Are they usually what the SSS will tell you is that matters of government security, nobody has said anything about that here. So what exactly are they doing? If government starts to flout court orders, what happens when individuals do the same? And we've seen it time and time again that over the last 3-4 years, over the last 6 years, government has continually flouted court orders, and this is another one that has come to play. They should please obey the court orders so that when they too have court orders, then it's easier for them to implement it rather than getting everyone.
It goes beyond just saying
everyone
please.
saying.
I was going to say that.
It goes beyond saying please.
Yeah.
There are consequences. There are real consequences to flouting court orders. It's characterized as contempt of court. First of all, the order, right, was described by many critics as a tragedy to the nation. But the implications of this is if you obtain a form A48, that form is essentially warning an alleged contemptor of the possibility of being jailed if he or she continues to disobey court order. And then subsequent to disobeying that form 48 or not abiding by that
form
injunction
49.
Exactly, which is initiated quasi-criminal proceedings against the alleged contemptor, which means directly that anybody who's actually roped into that suit can be arrested and jailed for contempt of court. So it's good that we make clear these consequences and let's not be a matter of please, I beg, come and obey.
And just one last thing,
Yes.
and I think the court itself should ensure that this is enforced.
Yep.
All right, we have Michael Adetutu on WhatsApp saying, if you take a deep look at our country, Nigeria, our SSS and other security personnel are using a form of repression. The root cause is the government because they also flout court orders too. We hope for better Nigeria, but also hope we should prepare for the worst. God bless Nigeria.
Samuel from Lekki says, could it be that the DSS has logistic problems to release them? That seems to be the new excuse.
Exactly.
As with the case of Nnamdi Kanu.
All right, let's go on a break. When we come back, we take our last set of stories for today on Freshly Pressed 981. With zero worries, imagine a world. Apologies for my singing to our YouTube viewers. Paid financial. Sounds like an R&B song. We paid financial. We're back. Indeed, you're tuned in to Smooth 98.1, and it is
With Valentine Uhu.
and Ayomairo essay. It's Freshly Pressed 981, and before the break, we looked at some headlines. Today, we talked about the federal government threatening stricter restrictions as 1 in 10 Lagosians now positive. This is serious. Also, that the federal government has received 4 million doses of Moderna vaccines from the United States. It's a gift. It wasn't purchased. It was given to us free of charge. Director arrested for extorting 500 naira from Abia students. And we also talked about detained Buhari Moscow protesters wanting SSS boss jailed for disobeying court order. Now let's move on to our stories. Wade, no plan to convert dollar account holdings to naira, says the Central Bank of Nigeria. So the CBN has assured the public that it will monitor the deposit money banks to ensure they comply with set rules and meet the legitimate foreign exchange needs of Nigerians. This came as Apex Bank dismissed reports of the planned conversion of domiciliary accounts for FX holdings proceeds to naira. I'm chuckling here, but it's not a funny business at all. A number of account holders, FX account holders in Nigeria, are worried. As with when this instruction or this directive came from the CBN as to, or the announcement that they would stop selling FX to BDCs and would channel to commercial banks, the concern had been, would we have enough for what we need as a people? And part of what they said is that now that it's in the hands of the CBN and the banks, wild things could happen with people's money, especially FX. What's your take on this story, Wade? And tell me if, well, just give me your general thoughts
so
on
first
this.
and foremost, it was welcome news that they stopped selling to the BDCs.
For you, there are divergent views.
And I agree that there are divergent views, in my opinion. But the second thing is, it becomes easier for the CBN to monitor the transactions that go through the banking sector, because they are the regulators. They sell it to them. They know how much goes through, how much was sent to them, and how much is being sold on a daily basis. And I don't think customers should be scared of their FX account being converted to naira, except you're going to take out of the FX in naira, then it will do, those conversions will happen.
Yes.
And I know that over the last since the beginning of the year, or sometime last year, when the CBN said once monies are transferred, you get it in the
Naira.
currency. No, you get it in the currency that it comes in.
Oh yes.
And I know banks have complied with that to the best of their ability, except people who say, just give me the naira and add the 5 naira to it. So I don't think customers should be scared. I think what customers need to do is continually push to ensure that the banks are more transparent in terms of how they get their information, in terms of their accounts, monitor their accounts better, and ensure that funny things are not being done. But for ease of monitoring, all things going through the banks will clearly have schedules that have to be submitted to the CBN on a weekly basis, on this time most around on a daily basis. And more banks are beginning to comply in all their branches to have a dedicated FX counter. So will it be enough? I really don't know, because we don't know how much the CBN is going to put into the banks in terms of dollar cash or whichever currency it is.
Yeah.
But I don't think they should be scared. I think it's welcome.
How
and they need
about
to monitor?
In this article from The Guardian, it says that each traveler is entitled to buy $4,000 per quarter for PTA, personal travel allowance, and $5,000 per quarter for business travel allowance. I mean, okay, let me leave the PTA aside. Business people, $5,000 in 3 months.
It's been like that for. It used to be $5,000 for a business trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's trip.
So it's been like that for a while.
No, it hasn't. For business people, right? BDC had given them the leeway the flexibility to access funds, no matter how much they could access. Now it now depended on the limits that the BDC had on them, like how much cash they had at their disposal to give out. But now it now restricts. It's going to affect businesses. That's a real talk.
Valentine, business travel allowances have been $5,000.
But that's what Val is saying. So
now
with the BDCs,
it still. It doesn't stop the fact that CBN is not supplying the BDCs with FX, that the BDCs are not going to get FX. What it just means is that the BDCs will now have to source their FX from alternative sources and not at the CBN rate, whereby
more expensive.
First and foremost, at the CBN rate, you get it at a particular rate, and before you even start selling, you already added a 20% markup.
all right.
So that is it. It's
Okay,
It's
Otunuga
going to
says
be
on WhatsApp, this issue of conversion of dollar currency in DOM account to naira is a rumor that has been on since 2015. CBN has not done that since then, so I don't think they will do that now.
I'm sure one of the reasons why people were suspecting or not trusting was the fact that governments woke up one day and said they were going to start collecting money that was dormant in people's accounts. It's not used for many years. Fabian from Request says, is this happening that as the COVID-19 infection rate is increasing, there's now an ongoing doctor strike? Government needs to get its act together to address its strike or this strike ASAP and enforce the safety protocols. Good morning.
Thank you, Fabian, and thanks a lot, Otunuga. Federal government to make cash transfer to 200,000 senior citizens impacted by COVID-19. This day reports the federal government will later this month commence cash payments to 200,000 urban poor senior citizens that do not have access to regular income and were severely impacted by the COVID-19 lockdown. According to this report, the Coordinator National Social Safety Net Program under the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, Ayowa Pera, stated this yesterday during the Senior Citizens Forum Made in Dialogue held in Abuja. What's your take on this, Wade?
good gesture. But my problem is how transparent will it be? And I hope they've not even said how much is going to be transferred to them. That's one. We hope is not you transfer to another 200,000 people that nobody can account for some sums of money. But it's a good gesture. But the other thing is, what's the basis for categorizing them? A government that a lot of the people who have worked for government have become impoverished because they haven't been receiving their pensions. And you come out and say you want to give monies to 200,000 people, 200,000 individuals who you say are poor. Some of them have become poor because they are not even receiving their pensions. So first and foremost, ensure that those things are done. Let them have their source of regular living. And then it's easier for you now to say, okay, maybe you need to augment what they have. Good gesture, but we need to see how transparent it is and give us the modalities for us to be able to assess it, and at the end of the day be able to say they did the right thing and how much went into it.
But also to identify who falls under that category.
Yes.
How do you now say who are they?
Yeah, that's why I said, so you need to provide the criteria for, based on this, they said it was based on location from a pool of 2 million people. So who are the 2 million people? Who are these 200,000 people that have been selected? So all these things, we need to see how these things have been justified and how they've been categorized in terms of how to make these funds available. What is the basis of declaring that this is a poor senior citizen?
Right.
And
it will be good to, I haven't checked that, and I think it's something worth exploring in terms of the government social intervention program as a whole. Because when you come up with, I think we need to give 200,000 senior citizens money. How did you come about that? Is that the most need? Does that represent the most need in society? Also, the impact of previous editions of social intervention, especially during this COVID, because we have seen a huge amount of money allocated to that sector. And if you're going to put money into that sector, the people want to see some form of transparency and, to see that the people who have been earmarked for this benevolence are actually getting it. So it's not about headlines like this. We want to ensure it's good.
First, they're qualified and they get it. So.
Well, Ayo makes a key point. Qualified, they get it, good. From the precedents, the things that the monies they've shared before,
let's see
in that way. Who did it get to? Who benefited? Check the successes, check the failures, pick up from the lessons, and then apply to others. If there are people who even benefited the most, then see that the others that didn't benefit enough
are part of this
receive.
I think it's just, again, one of the, like you said, one of the biggest challenges of this government is communication. We almost need, we have a retinue of communication assistants. However, it still is not trickling down to the people. Is there a website? Are there places where we can easily access information?
Was there a random sampling? How did you come about this rationale? How did you even decide that there are 200,000 or 2,000, whatever number you came up with?
All right, let's move on to Hush Puppy update. And that is that the EFCC, that's the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, refutes claims of advising MOMFA to keep low profile in the wake of Hush Puppies singing, or like a bird, like some people have described. But, in mentioning a few people, According to Wilson Uwujarin, who is popularly referred to as, Wilson Uwujarin is the EFCC spokesperson, but I'm trying to look for his real government name. I think it's
Ismaila
Ismail
Mustafa.
Mustafa. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's him. He's under investigation currently with the EFCC for being complicit in in fraud. He's still in court. He then made a video. People have know that he has relationships with hush puppies. He then made a video saying that claiming that the EFCC had told him to keep a low profile, so as if they have something to hide. They've now come out to say no, we didn't see any such thing. Please tell us about this unfolding drama.
Okay, so one of the major things that the FCC said is if you're saying someone told you to go low profile, who was the person in the FCC so that we can know and deal with those issues directly. But like it always happens in Nigeria, when people get into trouble, then you start hearing that, oh, is one big person that is behind the person and so on. But the good thing about this is that the case is in court. The FCC has rounded up its part. And funny enough, rather than Monfa to put up a defense, he filed a no-case submission, which was overruled by the court. So why are you filing a no-case submission? The lawyers will be in a better position to tell us this. But the SCC has arraigned him in court for 22 counts, alleging various offenses, foreign exchange sale without license, and so on. We'll get to the root of this, but let the courts come out and let him put up his defense. And at that point in time, when they're cross-examining him or examining him and asking him the questions, let him mention the names of the EFCC officials in quote, or the alleged EFCC officials who have told him to stay low.
Yeah.
And what was the basis for them telling him to stay low.
All right, thank you. Prince says, with regards to the CBN story, business travel allowance, BTA, is different from import and export window, which is unlimited, provided the importer or exporter is not dealing with FX restricted items and it passes through Form M and Form A. Thank you very much. Yes, so a business travel allowance is a payment made to a corporate traveler by an employer to cover expenses incurred on a business trip. So it would be what you would apply for if you're going on a business trip. And they say that commonly common expenses are accommodation, food, drink, and transportation. So to clarify that, thank you very much, Prince. Let's go on to our final headline for today. Parents of abducted Islamia schoolgirls kicked against military operation, says Niger Secretary to the State Government, Alhaji Ahmed Ibrahim Matani. The Niger State Government has given the reason why the pupils of Salihu Tanko Islamia School in Tegina are still being held hostage by the abductors, saying the parents of the children kicked against military operation for their rescue. Now, it's not just as simple as that. So what happened is that they wanted to raid the forest where the girls are being kept. But the parents, of course, said that there'll be collateral damage. You can't go in there and, and conduct a raid. It's likely that a child would be hurt. Would rather not have one child killed and still, let's negotiate with them. So, what do you make of this? And bear in mind the comments by the governor of Kaduna State, El-Rufai, that they should just go and
raid
the forest.
place.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, true, you need to inform the parents of this kind of actions that need to be taken, and they also have to show some form of willingness, which they have not. However, for me, is in situations like this, and you've heard that the state government has said that they are not paying any form of ransom to bandits. So what do? Are the parents willing to pay the ransom? And even when these ransoms are paid, are they going to release the students? So it's a chicken and egg situation. So what do? Do they continually wait? You must get to a point whereby the decision has to be taken by the chief executive officer of that state, who is the governor, on what to do.
Who has asked for everybody to just be killed in that bush? Crudely speaking. But I'm just saying, sorry to interject and add to what you're saying. I think it speaks to the, would I say, the obeying, or rather, for lack of a better term, the fact that the military actually obeys human rights protocols, that institution. Many times you hear that the army is accused of human rights violations and stuff like that. It would take them nothing to actually go into the bush to clear,
Yeah.
as the governor had,
Yeah, takes them
proposed. But the fact that they're actually waiting and holding themselves back from taking that action, seeing that there's collateral damage that could happen,
Yeah.
speaks to the fact that they have that in check, and also the PR efforts of the military, speaking to the parents and relating with them.
Absolutely.
The updates.
All right, thank you so much. That's all we can take. However, we will be taking your comments and calls in a few minutes during Lagos Talks 981, including those we couldn't get through during Freshly Pressed. A big thanks to our analyst for today, Wade Ahimie. We're really grateful, and to all our listeners and viewers on YouTube, a big thanks to you as well. Let's continue the conversation in a few minutes. Thank you, everyone. Lagos Talks. Aye.